3, 2, 1. Oh my goodness. Good morning, good afternoon. Whatever it is for you, I hope you're having a fantastic day. My name is Zach Schomler. This is Strong Opinion Sports, episode 355. Welcome in. I am calling this episode my NHL Playoffs Extravaganza. And it's we're recording in the middle of round one. You'll hear about my plan for the NHL playoffs down the road. I'm going to try to record a podcast about every round, kind of a recap of round one, and then a preview of round two. Like kind of between every round, we'll do that. I am recording this in between two episodes, so interviews. So what you'll see in this episode is two long-form interviews, one with Nathan Shield, a guy who I love. I view him as a hockey expert. I want to introduce him to you. He's phenomenal. And by the way, him and I's conversation, we had never talked in person at all, and never talked at all, let alone face to face, through a camera before our conversation. So I thought we started cool and we got warmer as it went on, and then also we had a delay where I would say stuff, and then there's a delay, then he would start talking, and I think it took us about 10 minutes before we figured it out. But man, I'm really proud of that. It's a great conversation. I learned a lot. I had so much fun. I think we talked for like an hour. I mean, we really had a great time. Then later, after that interview, I'm going to do an interview in about an hour with a really good friend of mine, Austin Kram, who is he's got an MMA podcast. He's really, really cool. And he is the person who introduced me to hockey. When I was a kid, his dad had season tickets, and they used to take me to go watch hockey games. And it's where I fell in love with the sport of hockey. And I got to be honest, I love hockey. I don't feel like I have the tools in the toolbox to follow hockey. Between time and bandwidth and everything I have going on, I rely on people like Austin and Nathan to tell me what's going on. So they're going to come on today. We're going to talk about hockey and have a blast. And I'm just now realizing as I'm recording, I'm talking to a camera. So if you're audio, you don't care. One pair of headphones is here. The other pair of headphones is here. You're seeing my ears for the first time in maybe a year. I haven't shown my ears on the podcast in like a year. So, hey, look at these big elephant ears. Welcome in, guys. Hello. Guys, I had a blast talking about hockey with Nathan. About to record the next interview with Austin Kram. Please now enjoy the NHL Playoff Extravaganza. Interview one right now with Nathan Shield. Hello, everyone. Welcome in. Joining me off to my right, you can't see him. We got like 4 computers in here. Nathan Shield, a guy who I am really excited to talk to, a hockey expert. Nathan, how are you?
I'm pretty good, Zach. How about you?
I'm doing well. First of all, I'm going to ask a lot of questions here. If I was talking about football or basketball, I could very easily, I feel like I know the answers. I don't know the answers to a lot of the questions I'm going to ask you today and the things I'm trying to understand. And you follow hockey much more closely than I do. And so I was like, look, I want to talk about hockey, but I can't do it by myself at all. And so I hope you know, like I am coming to you as a brand new, like not very informed child to ask a lot of questions. And I'm really excited about this.
Yeah, perfect. I'm excited to talk hockey today.
I think if we may, first of all, is there anything that's really surprised you so far about the NHL playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing right now is really how competitive it is. I mean, you look at the field normally in a normal season, there's normally a few teams where it's like, yeah, they're kind of just here for the first round, but it seems like this season there's a lot of teams that really have a real chance. If they can win their first round matchup, I mean, you never know how far they could go. So that's been really apparent to me early on.
What happened? I saw something with the Panthers and the Lightning. There was a bunch of social media stuff going on, and I was looking up what happened to the Carolina Panthers in the NFL. Like, did Sam Darnold get hurt? Like, what's happening? Like, oh no, the NHL playoffs are happening. And so I think in game one, something went on with the Lightning and the Panthers, and I saw Scooter Magruder, a guy who I follow on Twitter, was like, Panthers fans, you want to talk about it? I'm like, talk about what? I don't know if you know what he was referring to, but something has been happening in that series.
Yeah. So this is an interesting series, and I'm a Panthers fan personally, so I've been watching these pretty closely. But it's kind of the first time there's really been a true rivalry in Florida. Tampa has been traditionally pretty good. They've won Stanley Cups before, 2 of them. The Panthers made a run, but they haven't really been good in a while. So for the first time, they're really good. Tampa is obviously coming off of a Stanley Cup championship, so they're really good as well. So it's been really back and forth. Referees have kind of been letting them play, so I know both teams have been a little upset with that. But it's been a hard-fought series. It's 3-1 right now, but both teams are giving it their all. It's a closer matchup than it is on paper.
Who do you think? So right now, Game 5 is Monday. Tampa Bay leads 3-1. It's the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Florida Panthers. I'm curious, do you think Tampa's going to finish the series on Monday, or I think it's going to be extended longer?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough question. The Panthers are going back home. They're going to play in their own arena for Game 5, the BB&T Center. And there's increased capacity in the arena, so they're going to have 75% of the fans. So I think they could feed off that energy, maybe pull out a win, but I think Tampa's a little too good for them right now. And there's been questions about the Panthers' goaltending, so I think Tampa will finish it out on Monday.
What makes Tampa better?
Yeah, I mean, Tampa is just pretty much good all over the ice. I mean, if you look at hockey, it's kind of unlike any other sport because there's so many guys on the ice during the game. I mean, there's 4 lines of forwards, so there's normally 12 forwards on the ice. I mean, not on the ice, but in the game. So there's going to be a lot of different players playing. So you can't just have one star player really impact a game like you can in other sports. Tampa has a lot of really good players throughout their lineup, a lot of guys who kind of go underappreciated maybe by the average fan that are really good players. They just kind of are secondary in Tampa's lineup because they're so talented. So that's been big. And they have arguably the best goaltender in the world, and Andrei Vasilevsky, so he's pretty hard to beat.
And I've heard you talk about goaltenders a lot like a quarterback in football, where there's only one, and they really dictate whether you can win or lose in hockey, correct?
Yeah, they're crucial if you want to win.
How about the Carolina Hurricanes at the Nashville Predators? That game is happening literally in like a couple minutes, actually. I think it just started, actually. Game 4 today, Carolina leads 2-1. Who do you think is going to win this series?
Yeah, I got to go with Carolina. Carolina is really good. It's kind of interesting right now. A lot of the teams in the South are really emerging as really good. Carolina and the Panthers both have never been phenomenal. I mean, Carolina's won a Stanley Cup, but it was about 12 years ago. So it's really the first time they've been good in a bit as well. And they've got a great goalie. He's a really good story as well. He was actually waived by the Hurricanes, which means anyone in the NHL, if they wanted to pay the price for him, they could pick him up. So they waived him at the beginning of the season about 4 months ago, and he's on an entry-level deal. So it's the cheapest contract you can get, and no one wanted to pick him up. And he's just been a great story. He's been really good. He's a young guy, never really got a chance, but he's taken advantage of the opportunity and been phenomenal. So they're really good up and down the lineup as well. I mean, they could beat Tampa and come out of the Central Division. They're a phenomenal team, and they're really well coached.
What was that guy's name, the young guy?
Yeah, his name's Alex Nedeljkovic. He's a goaltender. He's won
That's so cool.
in the AHL a lot, but he's just never really cracked the lineup in the NHL. So it's awesome to see him get his opportunity and take advantage.
That's a good story. That's pretty cool. How about the Colorado Avalanche and the St. Louis Blues? Game 4 is today. Colorado leads 3-0. Is Colorado going to win today?
Yeah, Colorado's going to win for sure. Colorado is, I think, the best team in the NHL right now. I mean, they have a phenomenal GM, Joe Sakic, who has really been building this team for a while. They've got a lot of good pieces, and they've got really good depth. A lot of good young guys, too. They've drafted really well, like I said. Goaltending is strong, too. I mean, they are just phenomenal up and down the lineup. Oh, man. I just blanked. Nathan McKinnon is arguably the best player in the NHL. He's on their first line. They get Gabriel Landeskog and Mikko Rantanen, who are both phenomenal players as well. They're both, all three of them are probably top 25 players in the NHL, and they play together, so they're deadly. And then their defensemen are really good too. They got 4 defensemen. They're all under, I believe, 25, and they're all really, really good. And they're all pretty cheap because they're young players. So they're kind of in a fortunate situation right now, whereas if everyone was kind of making the money they deserved, they wouldn't be able to afford this team. But because they got a lot of young guys, it's a little more affordable. So they're kind of built to win right now.
Colorado won the President's Trophy, which is the award for having the best regular season record. Is that? I don't even know what that means. Is that just a trophy? They're like, congrats, but you don't actually get anything for that. Does it give you an advantage in the playoffs? How does that factor into the playoffs at all, if at all?
No, so that actually doesn't give you any advantage. And if you talk to some hockey analysts, they'll say it gives you a disadvantage because traditionally you win the President's Trophy, you probably will not win the Stanley Cup. That's just what the statistics say. But there's been a few teams recently that have kind of proven that theory wrong. So I don't think it'll affect Colorado too much. I think it's just a bit of a confidence booster going into the playoffs for them.
What's the theory there? Is it like you're worn out from going so hard in the regular season, didn't rest enough? Like I know the Warriors a couple of years ago had that incredible record, and they were worried like, well, they just did everything they could too early and ran out of steam at the end.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. A lot of people think that maybe it makes you a little too comfortable. Maybe you're taking people lightly. I'm not really sure why it is, but a lot of teams that have won it have just not gone on to win. I don't think a team has won it and then won the Stanley Cup since 2012, 2013 when the Blackhawks did it. So it's been a while.
Yeah, I didn't know that. How about the next game? Another game today, Game 5. Boston leads 3-1. It's the Boston Bruins and the Washington Capitals. I got to say, I've always wanted to go to a game in Boston. I think it'd be really, really cool. Who do you think is going to win this series? Boston 3-1 playing today. Does Boston close it out today?
I'm not sure. These games, so as you mentioned, they're up 3-1, and every game has gone to overtime thus far. So these teams are really evenly matched, both really talented teams. But I think Boston does have the edge just because they have the momentum. They're back in Boston, so I think they're going to close it out, but I don't think it's going to be easy to probably go to overtime again.
That sounds like must-watch TV to me. Like the Washington Capitals trying to stay alive in a must-win scenario in a division in a series where it's gone to overtime so many times. I mean, I might even turn that on later today. That does sound fun.
Yeah, that's been a really fun series to watch. They're both really talented teams who I think whoever wins this series could make a deep run because they're both really talented.
The Edmonton Oilers and the Winnipeg Jets. Game 3 today. Winnipeg's up 2-0. I'm just curious, this series is just starting off still. What do you think is going to happen? What team is better and why?
Yeah, this is a kind of an interesting one as well because if you look at the regular season records, because of the way the NHL was structured this year, you didn't play any games outside of your division. So because Edmonton and Winnipeg are in the north, they ended up playing each other 7 times. So they know each other pretty well, and Edmonton dominated the series in the regular season. But in the playoffs, they just haven't been able to get it done. Winnipeg has a really strong goaltender. He won the Vezina Trophy 2 years ago last season, for the best goalie in the NHL. He's really good. Young guy, I think 25, Connor Hellebuck. He's phenomenal. So he's been really kind of the backbone for Winnipeg right now. He stole the first 2 games because Edmonton is one of the best offensive teams in the NHL. They have Connor McDavid, who's, if arguably the best player in the NHL, I'd say he probably is. He's put up video game numbers this year. He's really, really good. And they just have a lot of really good forwards. So they score a ton of goals. So to see them get shut down like Winnipeg has, it's pretty impressive. But I think Edmonton's going to come back. They haven't won a playoff series in a while, so they kind of need to do it this year.
So Winnipeg has shut down basically the NHL's highest leading scorer. It's like that's a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, Connor McDavid and his line mate on the left wing, Leon Draisaitl, are number 1 and number 2 in points. So you get a goal or an assist, you get a point. They're number 1 and 2. Like, they are unbelievably dominant on the ice together, especially. So the fact that they've been limited by Winnipeg is frankly like unbelievable. Winnipeg has been really, really good in the playoffs. I think I owe a lot of credit to their coach, Paul Maurice. He's one of the best coaches in the NHL, in my opinion. And he seems to have Edmonton figured out. So something's got to give here if Winnipeg wants to keep this series going, because if they go down 3-0, I think they're done.
Well, that's what's cool about the NHL is it's more impressive to me. If you create a great game plan in the NFL and you shut down Patrick Mahomes one time, hey, great, well done. But to do it in multiple games, that's really that's much more impressive to me. And I think it's fun to compare and talk about the differences. But I really I think that's a big deal that I think should be talked about too. That just it's not been one game like in the NFL. It's multiple games in this series. They've shut them down.
Yeah. I mean, the first game was 1-0. So to do that against a team like Edmonton was pretty unbelievable. I'm not sure how they're doing it, frankly, because in the regular season they couldn't figure them out at all. They just kept losing to Edmonton. They couldn't beat them at all. So the fact that they figured it out now is pretty unbelievable.
I got to tell you a story real quick. We'll talk about the Minnesota Wild in a moment. I think, by the way, the Minnesota Wild have my favorite team name in sports. I think I say Wild a lot, and I don't know where I got that, but I'm like, oh, that's Wild, and then I look at that team name and I love it. When I was talking one time about the Denver Broncos, I completely blanked on Joe Elway's name. I was like, their GM, that guy, that quarterback, the dude who's like a Hall of Famer. Like I remembered like everything, like his dog's name, and I couldn't remember his name at all. And there was a moment like 2 games ago we were talking about, you kind of blanked for a second. I just want to encourage you, man. Dude, if you fucking forget a name, no big deal. Like I've forgotten like Hall of Fame players' names, and I'm like, and people get mad at me. It's like, dude, come on. I know what I'm talking about. Like, you know your stuff. I think it's funny. It reminded me of that moment because it's hard people forget how hard it is to talk into a microphone for hours at a time, and just, you have all this information going through your head. And I just wanted to remind you and encourage you of that. I think that's funny.
Yeah, I mean, when you know what you want to say, you kind of start tripping over it. You're like, oh, I want to hit this, and this. But yeah, all right, I'll keep that in mind, man. That is pretty funny though.
Oh, dude, I got so much anger. It's like, come on, of course I know the dude's name. I was in the moment. I forgot, like, your mind goes blank. Let's talk about the Minnesota Wild and the Golden Knights. Game 5 is tonight, is Monday, excuse me. Game 5 is Monday. Vegas is up 3-1. What do you have to say about this series?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the few series where it's pretty one-sided. I mean, Carolina is a similar situation where Nashville just isn't competitive right now. They're not good enough right now to really put up a true challenge, and that's kind of how it is for Minnesota. They're good. They have a lot of young guys who I think will improve. I think they're going to be a team to look out for in the future, but right now they just don't have the star power to compete with Vegas. I mean, Vegas has a ton of superstar players. Mark Stone on the first line, he's a right wing, he's phenomenal. Jonathan Marchessault on the second line is really good, and their goaltender Marc-Andre Fleury is a Hall of Famer. He's, I think, top 5 in playoff wins. He has 3 Stanley Cups, and at 36, he's playing some of his best hockey of his career. It's pretty remarkable. So I think Vegas is going to win this next game and close it out. And I think they are a team to watch for the Stanley Cup as well because they're that good.
So Vegas could be a team that could win it all.
Yeah, no doubt. They have they're an expansion team, but they've kind of went against the traditional route. They kind of have an older team, so they need to win within the next year, 2 or 3, like this year or next year or maybe the following. If they don't, they're going to be a tough situation because they got a lot of old players on long contracts. So the pressure is on for Vegas right now.
And the window's closing, it sounds like.
Yeah, the window is definitely closing. They're going to run out of cap room here soon. If they don't win it this year, they're going to be in a real tough position financially, and they're going to have a lot of old players who may start to decline as well.
So the Boston series really excites me. I'm going to watch a game tonight. Then you also have a series tied 2-2, the New York Islanders and the Pittsburgh Penguins. Talk to me about that series. Game 5 is on Monday. That sounds exciting to me. Like close, fun, 2-2, 2 big markets, 2 big names. Talk to me about that series.
Yeah, so I mean, this is one of my favorite series right now too. I think this one is really interesting because Pittsburgh, even if you don't know hockey, you probably know Sidney Crosby. You know the Penguins, they've been dominant in the past, and they're trying to do it again. They have Crosby. They have Evgeny Malkin, who's also been a superstar in his career. He's going to be a Hall of Famer along with Crosby. And they're they've just been good for a long time, so you can't really count them out. I don't love their depth. They don't get a ton of depth scoring, though they did get Jeff Carter at the trade deadline, who's a little old. Some thought he was maybe washed up, but he's came in. He's been really good for the Penguins since they acquired him. Goaltending has been a question mark for the Penguins as well, so if they lose, I think that's going to be the reason. But don't count out the Islanders either. They're a really good team as well. I mean, there's a reason it's 2-2. They get a lot of depth scoring. They can score pretty much from anywhere. They're really well coached. Their coach won a Stanley Cup 2 years ago with Washington. So they're a good team. They play more of a defensive game, so it's not as exciting, but they squeak out victories, and they made a deep run last year. So both of these teams are really good. This is a really good series.
No, I'm taking notes. I think it's interesting. I want to ask about Sidney Crosby because he's in year 16. He's 33 years old. And if you're watching this and you're a football fan or like you like Formula One or basketball and you're not a hockey guy, which I don't know how you would be here, but if you are somehow this far into the video on the podcast and you've never you don't follow the NHL, everybody knows Sidney Crosby. I mean, if you are an American, anybody in America who follows sports to some degree has heard that name before. What stage of his career is he in? Is he still playing at a high level? 33, I would imagine in a sport, 16 years in your career in hockey, your body's beat up. What stage of his career is he at right now?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, Crosby and Malkin, they've kind of been together for a while, and they're still pretty dynamic. They're both good players. They both still put up a lot of points, but I think the consensus around those two is they need to get it done this year or next, or else the wheels are going to fall off, because they're really the heart and soul of the team. If they don't perform, the team doesn't perform. So they kind of need to get it done while they're both still playing at a high level, because I think you're going to start to see a decline, especially in Malkin, probably next year. In Crosby, I think he maybe has 2 or 3 good years left, but I don't know if they're going to be back in a situation like this. So the pressure is on for them to win now as well.
So this is like their opportunity. So as I look around, you'd have Edmonton beating Winnipeg beating Edmonton. That's a surprise. That's exciting. That's interesting. There's another question. Can Pittsburgh get another win, or can they have another good run? Kind of like one of their final. It kind of reminds me of Drew Brees in the NFL, where you have this Hall of Fame player who you're kind of wondering, can he make one more run at the end of his career? That's kind of where we're at with Sidney Crosby, correct?
Yeah. Crosby's won 3 Stanley Cups, so it's really the quest for that last one. I know a lot of voices in Pittsburgh are saying, let's get one more for Malkin, let's get one more for Crosby, close it out with 4, because I don't know if they'll be able to make another run without those two. They're going to have to go through a serious rebuild, so they're just trying to get one more, I think, in this era, and then they're going to have to retool or rebuild, and you're going to see an entirely different team in Pittsburgh.
So that would be a good story. Do they actually have a legitimate shot to win?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Islanders are pretty good. So if they can get through the Islanders, I think that would be a real confidence boost for their team. They still have a lot of good players. I'm not really sure if they can make a deep run. Like I said, goaltending has been a question mark. But if they can get solid goaltending, I don't see why they couldn't make a deep push, especially if Crosby is playing at the level we've seen him traditionally in the playoffs.
Absolutely. The last series I want to talk about, the Toronto Maple Leafs at the Montreal Canadiens. Game 3 is Monday. Series tied 1-1. Is that competitive? That sounds competitive and fun when I just read you. It's 2 teams in Canada, 2 big names that I know. The series is tied 1-1. Game 3 coming up. Is that my assumption is based on just knowing that that's going to be a fun series?
Yeah. This is an awesome series, frankly. Toronto is really good this year. They have the best team they've had in probably 25 years. I mean, maybe even longer. They're really talented this year. So the pressure is really on, because a Canadian team hasn't won the Stanley Cup in a long time. So a lot of eyes are on them to make a run. They have Austin Matthews, who's a young American kid. He's phenomenal. He scored the most goals in the NHL this year. And they have a really good, talented young team. But goaltending has been an issue all year. They had Frederik Andersen, who was their starter for a long time. He went down early in the season, so they had backup Jack Campbell step in. He's been good, but he's never really started in the NHL before in his career. So if they don't win, I think it's probably going to be on the goaltending. Meanwhile, Montreal doesn't have the talent up front like Toronto. They don't get a ton of goal scoring. They have some good young players, but the depth isn't there like it is for Toronto. I mean, Toronto can score from anywhere, where Montreal pretty much only gets scoring from their top two lines. The third and fourth line don't contribute a whole lot offensively, but in that they have one of the best goalies in the NHL and Carey Price. So he's really the reason they won game one. So he's going to need to be good if they want to continue to win this series. But I think Toronto has a little too much urgency right now, a little too much pressure on them to lose this first round matchup.
I want to ask you about the MVP award because hockey does a weird thing where, weird's the wrong word. They don't just call it the MVP award; they call it the Hart Trophy, and I always struggle because there's I have to remember the names and how they correlate with other awards in the NHL. Who's your favorite, and who do you talk to me about the MVP award and the Hart Award, the Hart Memorial Trophy, and what you think should and will happen?
Yeah, I mean, the Hart is a really interesting trophy because, like you said, it's most valuable players. So there's a few different ways to look at it. I mean, it's supposed to be most valuable player to your team versus most valuable to within the league. So your team could be horrible, but if you're the best player and you're the only reason they're winning, you could win the Hart Trophy in theory. So there's a lot of players that have kind of been in the conversation, but I would say personally, I would probably give it to Austin Matthews in Toronto. He really drives their offense. He scores a ton of goals. He's kind of the heart and soul of the team. So I think I would give it to him, but there's a lot of different players who could win it this year. I'm really interested to see who the jurors select.
Well, I would imagine it's similar to the NFL with quarterbacks where is it true? Are goalies often in the conversation simply because of the importance to their team?
Yeah. So a lot of times, if you see a goalie win, it's going to be because their team is not very good, and they're pretty much the reason that they're competitive. So that goalie for the Canadiens I just touched on, Carey Price, he won it back in 2014-15 when they were not a very talented team, and he was undoubtedly the best goalie in the NHL, and he was stealing them games regularly. So he was the last goalie to win it. But yeah, if a goalie wins it, it's traditionally because their team is struggling and they're pretty much relying on their goalie to bail them out night in, night out.
Is that something you can measure with numbers? Because I know often MVP awards, and really any award, comes down to statistics. And if you don't have statistics, people really struggle to latch onto that. Is there a way, with goalies playing on a bad team doing well, is there a way to do that with numbers? Or is that just something you have to watch the film and be like, yeah, no, this dude on a terrible team is carrying?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of it's kind of tricky. It's kind of like quarterbacks where you don't see a lot of the highlights because, I mean, there's a lot of highlights that you miss because their team will mess up. So a receiver drops a pass. It's kind of like when a defenseman will miss a read or something like that. Like a goalie could make a phenomenal play or a quarterback could make a phenomenal play, but because his teammates don't help him out, he's kind of left out to dry. So it's kind of tricky. I mean, there's advanced analytics that you can use that will kind of highlight that stuff, but I think for the most part, it more comes down to watching and saying, yeah, this guy's phenomenal. He's pretty much the only reason they're in this game, and I think that's probably the best way to do it.
What about Connor McDavid?
Oh, McDavid? Yeah, he's always in the mix. Yeah, McDavid is, I think most people would agree he's probably the best offensive player in the NHL. I don't know about all around, but he's definitely in the mix. He's been really, really good. He's putting up the most points per game since Mario Lemieux, who's another probably top 10 player of all time, maybe top 5. So he's having a phenomenal year. So I wouldn't be surprised if he won it, to be honest, because he's putting up video game numbers, like I said. In 56 games, he has 105 points. So that means he's scoring a goal and an assist pretty much every game.
Jesus,
or 2 assists every game.
That's crazy. I was watching I worked at an MLS game the last 2 weekends, and I wanted to blow my brains out. And I was literally, all I could think when I was watching soccer was, man, I wish I was watching hockey. Because there are some parallels, but they're tougher. They don't roll on the ground going please, trying to get a call. You touch them, they just get up and move on. And hockey has way more scoring. Not an absurd amount, but it's entertaining, it's fun, it's exciting, and you have guys who can score. The fact that he scored, is he averaging over 2 a game? That's unbelievable.
Yeah, so he has 105 points in 56 games, so a little less than 2, but I think it's like 1.7, something like that. And he's putting up like an assist every game at least, and he's scoring like 60% of the time. So he's really, really good. Like, he is unbelievably good.
So why is he not the consensus MVP? Is that because he has a lot of help, and maybe his team may not need him the same way a bad team might need a really good player? Is that accurate? Like, is it valuable or is it best? Because they are different.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of the thing with the Hart Trophy, where it's kind of hard to say. Like, the Chicago Blackhawks this year were not very good. They missed the playoffs, but they have Patrick Kane, who has won the award before. He's an American guy. He's really good. He's for sure Hall of Famer, and he's been pretty much their only player. They have another star player who was out all season, so he was in the conversation for a while. I'm not sure how high he ranks now, but it's really tricky because it's most valuable to your team, so it's really hard to judge. A lot of people will look at it differently.
Yeah, when I do my SOS NFL awards, I give out a player of the year. I give that to Aaron Rodgers because it's fun, like it's the best numbers. The two's like dominating. And then I give out a most important player, where I give that to Tom Brady in Tampa because he, in the NFL, went to a team that was bad the year before and took them to a Super Bowl. And I go, that's important versus player of the year. And any league that has an MVP award, I go like, okay, is it best player or is it most important? So there's always that debate around any kind of MVP award.
Yeah, it's tricky. I've gone back and forth with a few different players, but I think there's probably 3 or 4 players who are really in the mix. I think you'll probably see Nathan McKinnon, who's in Colorado. He's phenomenal. Him and McDavid are probably 1 and 2 right now in the NHL. You'll probably see Crosby in the mix again because he's been phenomenal. Austin Matthews in Toronto, and I'd say those are probably the top 4.
Is Crosby there because he's that good, or because he's older and kind of a star and people like? Is it marketing, or is he really deserved to be in the mix?
I think he deserves to be in the mix. He's definitely slowed down. He's not the elite player he used to be. He's still really, really, really good. Don't get me wrong, but he's not a top 4 player in the NHL right now. But for his team, he's kind of like, he's their captain. He's kind of the guy in Pittsburgh. So if he doesn't perform, it kind of brings the whole team down. So he's been really important to them. If it was best, I don't think he would win it. But because it's the MVP, most valuable to your team, I think he might get it, though. I'm not sure he will.
I'm curious because I ask this out of ignorance. I literally do not know the answer to this question. How do the playoffs work? I know you have East, you have West, you have North, and Central. So where do we go? We're in round 1. They play each other. Then where do they go from here? Does East play the West? Does North play Central? Like, what happens next?
Okay, yeah. So this is a good question because it's different this year. So if you knew how the playoffs worked previously, it's a different structure entirely this year because of COVID. They played all their games within their division. So if you were in the East Division, you only played teams in the East Division. And the same goes for everything else. So what's going to happen is you're going to play the first 2 rounds within your division. So at the end of it, there will be a 1 winner from each division. So at the end, there'll be, say, Toronto, Colorado, Boston, and Carolina or Tampa or something like that. These aren't predictions. These are just examples. So then at the end of that, when you have your final 4, it's going to go to seeding. So based on the regular season seeding, whoever finished the highest is going to get the first seed, and they will play whoever is the 4th seed based on the regular season results. That's why the President's Trophy was more important than usual this year. So if Colorado makes it out of the West, they'll get the presumably easier matchup in the Final 4. And then same goes for 2 and 3, and then from there you'll go to the Stanley Cup Finals.
I'm curious. I'd love to do an exercise. Can we run through every team in the playoffs? And what I want to do is hear from you. They have a shot or they don't. So like the Nashville Predators don't have a shot, in my opinion, right? That's I think you would agree with that. After that, I'm really curious. Do the Carolina Hurricanes have a shot?
Yes, Carolina. How deep do you want me to go on the answers?
Dude, go as deep as you want. I mean, this is all for fun for me. I want to hear nerdy hockey stuff. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. Carolina is really well coached. Their coach Rob Brindamore won them their last Stanley Cup. He was the captain of the team then. He's coaching now, so I think it would be a really awesome story if he won it. They have good goaltending, like I said, good forward depth. So I think they could win it for sure.
The Florida Panthers, do they have a shot? Not gonna win, but are they even? Is it a possibility?
It's a possibility. Goaltending has been a question, so you may see rookie goaltender go in for Game 5. He played this season at Boston University, but he went in the first round 2 years ago. So he's played, I think, 5 NHL games. He's been really good, but he hasn't been tested in the playoffs yet. So with goaltending be a question mark, they might turn to him. He's number 3 on the depth chart, so it would be a bold move, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it. And if he plays well, they could make a run. If he gets hot, they could make a run, but we'll see what happens. I'm not counting them out, but I wouldn't bet on him either.
So it sounds like no to me almost. Where like I guess I asked you, do they have a shot? So they have a shot. They have a legitimate chance.
They have a chance, but it's closing. It's closing every few minutes, I guess. Every game, it's gotten smaller.
The Tampa Bay Lightning, do they have a shot at a title?
Yes, Tampa won it last year. They're coming back with the same team. Pretty much, yeah. On paper, they're pretty much the exact same team they were last year, so they have a solid shot.
I know the answer to this, but it's fun to hear your answer as well. I would say my dumbass analysis would say that the Pittsburgh Penguins have a shot to win a title. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean this is a tricky segment because, like I said, there's only a few teams where they don't really have a real chance, but I think Pittsburgh could do it. If goaltending can play the way it needs to, they have a chance. But if goaltending if they can't figure out goaltending, they might not even make it past the first round.
It's fun because it'd be cool. It's a good story to watch a hero, the name I know in hockey, win one final, title near the end of his career. That'd be fun and exciting. And do you think he would retire if he won this year?
I'm not sure. I don't think he would, but he might just say, he's played for a long time. He made the NHL as an 18-year-old. He's played like over 1,000 games, so he might win it and say, you know what, let me go out while I'm on top. But I think he's still got a few good years left in him, so I don't know. Never say never, I guess.
Based on the little I know about him, watching interviews, and he's like literally the only hockey player. I'm like, I know something about him, right? It's because everyone always asks that question. When you get older and you win, it's like, are you going to leave? I don't think he cares about leaving on top. I would imagine he's like, man, because this is how I would look at it. If I was 33, 16 years into my hockey career, I'd be like, well, look, man, I can live the rest of my life retired. Like I always have the beach. I always have my house in the mountains. I always am going to have that. I'm probably never again in my lifetime going to get an opportunity. In fact, I know for a fact I'm not going to get an opportunity to play in the NHL at any level. So I might as well, I think the way Tom Brady looks at it too in the NFL is I'm going to take advantage of this moment and squeeze every little ounce of juice I can get out of that orange.
Yeah, I think the Tom Brady comparison is very very fair, I guess, because they're both consensus Hall of Famers. I mean, Tom Brady is probably one of the best football players of all time. Crosby is definitely a top 10 player of all time, if not higher. I would probably say 6 or 7, maybe even top 5 if he can keep winning. So I think he's going to keep playing, see what he can do, and just keep increasing those numbers, breaking records. Just, I don't know, keep being the best, I guess.
Yeah. The Washington Capitals, do they have a shot at a title?
Yeah, Washington definitely has a chance. They won it 2 years ago. They have a lot of the big names still. They have Alex Ovechkin, who's often compared to Crosby because he came into the league a year later. He's one of the best goal scorers of all time. He's also getting older, so they kind of are in a position where let's get one for Ovi. Let's win it now. Get him one more because he's only won one Stanley Cup in his career. Goaltending, this seems to be a common theme right now, but goaltending is a question mark there for sure. but they have a good coach in Peter Laviolette. I think they have a solid chance if they can beat Boston, which is looking unlikely right now.
Well, I'm curious, if you have so I would say you have a shot versus you are a favorite. In hockey, like if you have a question at goaltending, it would definitely make you not a favorite, correct?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. The Boston Bruins, they have a shot.
Yeah, Boston has a good shot this year. They have a lot of really good forwards, and they got Taylor Hall at the deadline. At the trade deadline.
I know that name too. Wow.
Steal. Oh. Yeah. Taylor Hall won the Hart Trophy, I think 2 or 3 years ago. He's a really good player, but he went to Buffalo in free agency, who was, to put it lightly, a dumpster fire this year. They lost 16 games straight at one point. They were horrible. So they really had no choice with Taylor Hall because he's on a 1-year deal. It was either trade him now, get something, or lose him in the free agent market for nothing. But because of the season he had, because he was playing on such a poor team, they really didn't get anything for him. So Boston got him at a bargain price, and he's been really good. I think he has 2 or 3 goals in the playoffs already, and he's been a difference maker for them.
Did Taylor Hall just cash out and kind of sell out a little bit and say, I know I'm not going to win, but I'll go to this team because they're paying me a lot?
Yeah, I'm not really sure why he went to Buffalo. Some say he has like a good connection with the coach or something. I'm not really sure what he was thinking, because in the free agent market before he had signed, he was talking about, I want to win, this and that, and it really just didn't make a lot of sense to go to Buffalo. I mean, they have Jack Eichel, who's one of the better young players in the league, but because he's been in Buffalo his entire career, he's really struggled at times. So it really didn't make any sense right from the start. They didn't have the talent to make the playoffs. I think that was pretty evident, even in free agency. So I'm not really sure why he did that. I think he had wanted to go to Boston, but they didn't offer him enough money at the time. But I guess it ended up working out because he's on Boston now, and he's in the playoffs, and he's making a difference. So
that's awesome. The Islanders, the New York Islanders, do they have a chance at a title?
Yeah, I think the Islanders have a good chance. They're pretty solid all around. Pittsburgh is a tough opponent in the first round. They struggled against them in the regular season, but they're well coached. They have good goaltending, good defense, good depth scoring. They're a team where if they were a little bit stronger, I'd say they were a favorite, but they definitely have a chance.
That East is crazy. Pittsburgh, the Capitals, the Bruins, the Islanders, like they're all so close and so competitive. Is that accurate?
Yeah, the East Division is super strong this year. There's a ton of good teams in the East Division. There was a few teams as well that missed the playoffs that were really good last year. Philadelphia Flyers, they kind of struggled down the stretch, but they have a lot of talent. Their goaltending was struggling this year, so it didn't really work out. But they made the playoffs last year, won a series. The Rangers are a good young team too. If they weren't in the East, they might have made the playoffs as well. So that's been a tough division. They're all really close with the points as well. So that's been a fun one to watch all season.
We'll skip the North for the time being. We'll start in Colorado. I would even ask, not only does Colorado have a shot, are the Colorado Avalanche a favorite to win the NHL title?
Yeah, I think calling them a favorite might be even an understatement. The NHL does the bracket challenge. I think they got like 55% of the vote. They're unbelievably good. They have a goalie who's won a Stanley Cup before, Philip Grubauer. He won with Washington a few years ago. Like I said, Nathan McKinnon is top 3, maybe top 2 players in the NHL. They can score anywhere. They've got really good young defensemen. They're just flat out unbelievable, and they know they need to win now. So they've been dominating in this first series against St. Louis.
How did Colorado build their team? Like, how did they get to this point where they're so dominant?
I'm not really sure how to put it. I want to say they got lucky a little bit with some drafting, but I think that might be a little disingenuous to them because they're one of those teams where their GM has just done an unbelievable job. I mean, because they've been good for a while, they don't get these super high picks. I mean, Nathan McKinnon was a first overall pick in 2013, I believe, but Other than that, a lot of their superstar players they've gotten later in the draft. So it's been pretty crazy. They've got Bowen Byram, who's a young guy. They just got him either last draft or the prior, I can't remember, but they got him at like 19, and he's already in the NHL. He's already making a difference. They've got they get a lot of good guys and late in the first round, in the second round, where a lot of these guys, you don't know if they're going to pan out, but they always seem to pan out in Colorado. I'm not really sure how they've done it, but they've really built from the draft, and it's really impressive.
Well, it's for sure. Probably both. It's where luck and preparation kind of meet each other. You hear that. I forget the quote. I wish I remembered it. I'd sound smarter, but it's kind of like opportunities where they meet each other. And it sounds like for sure they got lucky some of the stuff panned out, but there must be. I watch the Colts who draft every year in the NFL. They are dominant. And I know some people in the Colts building, and what they talk about, the way they build that organization, like they have a philosophy, they have a strategy and a plan, and it clearly works very well. Colorado, well, for sure there's luck involved. I like how you mentioned, like it might be a bit disingenuous because there also is some level of they're just good at what they do. They're good at drafting and developing players too.
Yeah, and they've made a lot of like really smart trades. They made a trade with San Jose that ended up giving them the 4th overall pick when that was kind of a throw-in. It was kind of a, if this happens, you'll get this pick. It ended up being the 4th overall pick, so that might have been a bit lucky because San Jose kind of thought they were in a position where they were going to be competitive for a while, and it just didn't work out that way. So that was pretty fortunate, but they've turned a lot of kind of late round picks where you don't really know what you're getting into legitimate NHL players. So it's been pretty crazy.
The window is closing though in Colorado, right? Because at some point they're not going to be able to afford all their young players as they get older and want new contracts. Correct?
On defense, they have. Let me just pull up the lineup so I can get the pairs right. They have right off the bat. They have Cale Makar, who's probably a top 4 NHL defenseman right now. He played college hockey for a few years at UMass Amherst, and he kind of broke onto the scene like immediately. He's really good. He's on his rookie deal still, so he's going to get paid a lot. Then they have Devon Taves, who's kind of an older guy. He's like 25 or 26, so he's making decent money, but he'll probably want to raise because he's been playing really good in Colorado. And then they have Ryan Graves and Sammy Gerard. That's their second D pair, those are both 2 young guys. They're not making a ton of money right now. Sam Gerard is still on his rookie deal because he's only 22 years old. I'm not sure if Ryan Graves is off of that rookie deal, but I know he's making less than $2 million right now. So they've got a lot of guys that aren't really getting paid what they're really contributing. So if they don't win soon, they're going to be in a tricky spot with those contracts. But they still have a little bit until they have to worry about that. But if they don't win now, that could be an issue.
Yeah, the window will close at some point, and the pressures. I mean, that's a fun thing to track over the next couple of years. Is can they get it done before they run out of time? How about Vegas? Does Vegas have a shot at winning a title?
Yeah, Vegas is really good. It's kind of interesting to look at the West compared to the East because the West, there's a lot of teams that are good and there's a lot of teams that were really bad. But Vegas is one of those teams where they were really good. They just missed out on the President's Trophy. They lost it on the last day when Colorado won their game, and they didn't. So they were right in the mix for best team. But like I said, they have a lot of older players going against traditionally what most expansion teams will do because they just joined the league about 3 years ago. They've moved a lot of young assets to get older, more experienced players to kind of try to win now. So there's a lot of good players around the NHL where you might be surprised to say, oh, that was a Vegas pick. So there's Nick Suzuki, who's a really good young player in Montreal, who was a Vegas pick that they traded away, like pretty immediately. He didn't even play a single game for them. A lot of people don't even know he was drafted by them. So that's just one. There's countless players like that where Vegas kind of said, we don't have the time for you because we're too good right now. We need to make a push now. We can't be worried about developing players right now. So the pressure is really on because their core is a lot of guys who don't have a ton of time left. Their goalie, like I mentioned, is 36 years old. Marc-Andre Fleury is one of the best goalies of all time. But at some point, he's going to decline. It's kind of a Tom Brady situation where it's like, I don't know when the wheels are going to fall off this thing, but they have to eventually. So I'm not really sure what's going to happen, but at some point, he's going to start to decline, or some of their offensive and defensive players are going to decline. So it's really kind of a ticking time bomb in Vegas right now. And their cap situation is going to be pretty crazy in a few years because they're spending a lot of money right now.
I love this. The NHL is the only place where Minnesota is considered the West. Because it's so north and east up in it's kind of the center of the NHL. And I've driven from Seattle, Washington to Minnesota. That is not the West at all. However, they're in the Western Division. So do the Minnesota Wild, who, by the way, I lived in Minnesota as a child, like very young. And I had a Wild jersey. It's way too small. I was like 10 years old then. Do the Minnesota Wild have a chance at a title this year?
I don't think they have a chance this year. The reason they're in the playoffs is they've had a few players emerge who probably weren't supposed to be as good as they are playing right now. Cam Talbot is a goaltender they just got, and they got in free agency last year. He was kind of an average goalie. He was kind of a fringe starter in the past, and he's really found his game in Minnesota, so he's been phenomenal. He's stolen a few games for them. But realistically, I don't think they're good enough right now. I think they still need to build a little bit more, need to get a little bit younger. I think they'll be a fun team to watch, but right now I don't think they're good enough.
The St. Louis Blues, are they a title? Do they have a chance at a title?
I don't want to count them out, but I don't think they really have a chance. Going against Colorado is a...
Make your decision, Nathan. Pick a side.
No, they're not good enough right now. Going against Colorado is like kind of a death punch in itself, but they're not really good enough. They're similar. They have a lot of the core pieces that they had when they won the Stanley Cup a few years back, but I don't think they're good enough right now. And their goaltender, Jordan Binnington, who was phenomenal in their Stanley Cup victory, hasn't been as good this year. So I think they're done for. And they snuck into the playoffs too, so they have really no chance.
Now in the North, Toronto. Do the Toronto Maple Leafs have a shot at a title?
Yeah, Toronto has a good chance at a title, probably their best chance since they won it last. I think it was 1967. So Toronto's been waiting for it. There's a lot of pressure on them.
They're hungry, man. Yeah. They're like, please.
Yeah, if they don't make it out of the North Division, I would be pretty shocked. I think they're too good to lose right now. They really need to win. I don't know if they'll win it, but they're definitely going to be in the mix.
Edmonton. Do the Edmonton Oilers have a shot?
Yeah, I think Edmonton has a good chance too. Winnipeg is kind of throwing a wrench in their plans right now by playing so well, but I would be surprised if it wasn't Edmonton versus Toronto in the North Division final, which will be the second round. So I think if they can they have some solid defensemen. Their goalie has been uncharacteristically good. I'm not really sure what's going on there. I said he was going to kind of pit her off because he had a really good start. I kind of look like a fool on that, but I'll own it. He's having a great year. But I still believe he's gonna like get off this hot streak at some point. I don't think he's as good as he's playing, so that's a question mark. But they're good. They're definitely good enough to win it if they can. If everything goes according to plan, they could win it for sure.
The Winnipeg Jets, they're up 2-0 over the Edmonton Oilers. That's a surprise to a lot of people. If they get past Edmonton, let's say that, so it's conditional. If they get past Edmonton, do they have a shot at a title?
This is a tough one. I'd say...
I know you want to say no. Noted, peer pressure needed.
I think they could. That might be a hot take, but their defense is not very good. But if they can get a good performance out of the players, like the offensive players, then they could. They had a huge trade earlier this season. They traded Patrick Laine to Pierre-Luc Dubois. Patrick Laine went third overall a few years ago. Pierre-Luc Dubois went fourth. Or no, Patrick Laine went second. Pierre-Luc Dubois went third. So that was a pretty crazy trade. And neither Laine or Dubois have really been as good as promised. So if Pierre-Luc Dubois can find his stride and really turn it on for Winnipeg, I think they could, because their offense is pretty good, but defense isn't great. So it's really going to depend on them scoring goals and their goaltender, Connor Hellebuck, kind of keeping them in it after that.
How about the last one I have to pull up? The Montreal Canadiens. Do they have a shot?
The North is so hard because there's a lot of question marks over how good the North Division really is. A lot of people don't really believe in the North Division teams. There's been a lot of people that say whoever wins the North is just going to go out right away, so it doesn't even matter. But I think Montreal could win it. They probably have one of their better teams they've had. They got Corey Perry on a league minimum deal. He's a good player. He's a feisty guy. He's kind of hated around the NHL, but I kind of respect his game a little bit. He gets under other teams' skin. He scores goals. He gets assists. Draws a lot of penalties. So I think they're good enough. I don't think they will, but if they get hot, I mean, you never know. And Carey Price, their goaltender, is phenomenal. So if he plays well, anything can happen.
They had 11 overtime losses in the regular season. Is that meaningful? I think as I look around, that's the most in the NHL. No, Dallas lost 14 that way, but Dallas is in the playoffs. So they're the last remaining team with the most amount of overtime losses. How does that factor in, if at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of speaks to their ability in crunch time. So it's a little bit of a red flag. Excuse me, but I don't know. Like there's this thing in hockey where it's kind of a trend at this point where you fire your coach and then you win the Stanley Cup. It happened in LA back in 2013. It happened in St. Louis 2 or 3 years ago. So they fired their coach, so maybe they'll get the fire coach magic that has affected so many teams as of late, but I'm not really sure. But I think the overtime thing really is kind of a blemish on their reputation, because those are the games you really need to win. You can't be losing in overtime. You need those points. So that definitely kind of speaks to their ability to close out games.
I feel like hockey coaches, man, have the worst job security. It maybe on the planet. Like teams burn through hockey coaches like it's nothing. I'm like, man, like I watched. Didn't the dude in Vegas like win a title and then get fired like the next year?
Yeah, like his team was first. His team was first in division, and then they lost like 3 games in a row and he got fired. Gerard Gallant.
It's like, dude, that's wild to me. That's all I have, man. Those are all my questions. I do know that. So, according to my notes, and then according to Nathan Shield, based on what I just learned, Minnesota has no shot. The Nashville Predators have no shot. My notes are gone. The St. Louis Blues have no shot to win a title. Are there any teams I'm leaving out that you're just like, that team? You don't hate them, but they really got no opportunity to win a title. I'm curious about that.
Let me look at the teams here real quick.
Well, because I know, and I'm curious, but before we answer that, why is the North just really weak? And so people say, because they play in their own little bubble, is the North just the self-contained a group of bad teams that winning that's not as impressive compared to winning, say, the East or the West?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a tricky question because everyone kind of has a different theory about the North. It's a really high-scoring division. There's not a ton of defense that gets played. They scored, like, by division, the North scored significantly more goals than any other division. There is a lot of offensive firepower in the North, so that could be it. But a lot of people think the North has like just suspect defense, which is pretty important in the playoffs, as you might imagine. And I think a lot of people just kind of assume Canadian teams have no chance because a Canadian team hasn't won the Stanley Cup in a long time. So I think that might be part of it. The defense could be part of it, but I don't know. I guess we'll see once we get to the Final Four how strong the North truly is.
That's such a silly thing. Like, I don't know why where you play games should determine whether you have a shot to win a title. I mean, that's kind of like quarterbacks that go to USC are always going to fail, or how it's like it doesn't matter. It's just like that's a situation. You know, it's just it's like one of those things that just has no actual relevance to the ability or actual opportunity to win a title.
Yeah, it's really weird. I'm not really sure what it is. I think it's a lot of people that just are kind of bitter about the North. Maybe they're Canadians, or maybe they root for a Canadian team, and they've just decided that because it hasn't happened in so long, no Canadian team will ever win again. So they kind of just want to doom their teams or something. I'm not really sure, but a lot of people are counting out the Canadian teams, so it'll be interesting to see what happens with them.
So something I didn't know going into this conversation, I've learned since then, is that they didn't play an open schedule. So you played only your division all year. It's kind of a weird science experiment to go like, this team has never played this other team, and that's going to be a fun matchup we haven't seen all year. Are there any, the Islanders have not played the Colorado Avalanche. Like, they haven't really, there are a lot of matchups where, like, you could even argue, hey, the Avalanche, they dominated the West. How much was that really a challenge? What's going to happen when they face a team that they haven't played before that's really good? Are there any matchups you're like, man, this team versus that team is my dream scenario?
Oh, man. This is a tough question. I would love to see maybe Boston versus Colorado. I think would be really fun. Maybe Tampa versus Colorado as well. There's a lot of good teams, and all these teams have really smart coaches. I mean, if you're one of the best teams in the NHL, you're going to have a great coach. So I'm really excited for that, because not only is it trying to figure out the players as a player, it's going to be the coach is trying to go over film and say, oh, this is how we have to attack Colorado. And we haven't seen him this year, so we can only go based on what we've seen on film. And I think the teams are going to know that as well and maybe make adjustments. So it's kind of going to be a chess match the first few games. It's going to be awesome hockey.
I'll give you two. I'd rather you pick one, but I get it. You're on the spot, and it's also hard. Like, I don't know, picking one thing for me, like, I can never pick my favorite movie. I'm like, I'll tell you my 5 favorite movies maybe, but I can't pick one. Who is your favorite? And you can go like 1A and 1B if you want to. Who's your favorite to win the NHL title?
This one's a little bit easier than you might expect, but I could be wrong. So I don't know. I'll own it. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. That's how it goes. But based on what I've seen this year, I think Colorado is going to win. They're too good to lose right now. Their forwards are so good. Nathan McKinnon is so dominant. That whole first line, Landeskog, McKinnon, Rantanen, they're phenomenal. When they're on the ice, they're must-watch TV. They fly past everybody. They're so fast. They're so skilled. And they're just phenomenal. You can't make any mistakes against Colorado because they're going to score. So I think they're too good. They're too good to lose right now.
Well, Nathan, first of all, do you have anything else you want to say? Any final thoughts that you think are left on the table?
No, I think we touched on pretty much everything.
Dude, I got to say, man, I thought we started off, like, we've never talked in person, so I'm not worried. I thought we got warmer as the conversation went on. But dude, you were phenomenal. Like, I learned a lot. I had a good time. I think this is fun content to make. And I would love to do this again. Maybe after every round, like round 1, round 2, all the way through the playoffs and then we can, like, talk about what happens in the Stanley Cup final. I don't need to try to cover it as it's going on. I think I probably don't ever want to do an episode again in the middle of a round like this. That's brutal. But if you want to, I'd love to go after every round to do a show like this. It'd be really fun.
Yeah. I think a recap would probably be the best way to format this. So I think that would be a really awesome idea.
Dude, I can't say thank you enough. And I had another thing I wanted to say, but I can't remember. I know that this was fun. And so thank you so much. I've had this on my heart for like a long time. I don't have the tool set to follow and say a lot about hockey, but I am interested. And I love hockey. I think people don't know that about me. It's one of my favorite sports. I love going to games. I just don't have the bandwidth to follow very closely. And it kind of breaks my heart because I love the sport. And I think the NHL is a phenomenal league. Like, I love baseball. I hate the MLB. I think Major League Baseball makes me so angry, and they're kind of ruining a good sport. NHL hockey is phenomenal, and I'm really glad to get an opportunity to talk about it with you. So thank you so very much.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me on, Zach.
All right, my man. Talk soon. I want to now shift gears to a conversation I had with my good friend Austin. It was fun to catch up. He's a friend of mine I've had for years and years. He's actually the reason I love the sport of hockey is because of him. So It was fun. It was exciting. Please now enjoy my conversation with Austin. Joining me now is a guy I love a lot, Austin Kram. How are you?
I'm doing well, Zach. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. By the way, so you may not know this about you. You're one of my favorite people
About me?
actually on
Okay.
planet Earth. Yeah, no, I'm sure.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I don't see you very often.
This is a great start to this pod, Zach. Please.
Well,
Go
so
on.
you're the first, I think, high school one of the first people I've known for a long time that I've ever worked with. I don't because
Okay.
I can't tell you why. It hasn't happened that way. But I like you, and I'll see you maybe once a year. COVID ruined that even more. But every time I see
Sure
you, it's
did.
like we pick up right where we left off. I love it. I love hearing your passion about MMA and hockey. And you know hockey really well. And so I was like, look, I'm doing this thing with Nathan Shield. I want to get you on too because I don't even have a lot planned for this conversation. I'm like, I just know you love hockey and we'll get good stuff out of it.
That's the goal here. I mean, yeah, I've seen you share on Instagram. You know, people will say, "Hey, do more hockey, do hockey." And every time I see it, I get this little twinge. I'm like, "Yeah, Zach, come on, let's get more hockey content because it's great." And this is the best time of year to pick up on that content. So I'm glad we're here doing this.
Yeah, man, I think what I'd like to do is do round one. After round one, we'll do a recap episode of round one. We'll do a recap episode
Okay.
of round two all the way through the playoffs until the championship and just have a good time along the way and talk about hockey. I love hockey, man. I've told this to a lot of people. I feel
Yeah.
like I don't have the bandwidth to follow it. So I got people like you and Nathan that I can reach out to, be like, what's going on? What's happening?
That's always the way it goes. I mean, you're so entrenched in football, and obviously you should be. You're great at it. It's just tough to follow along, you know, to the point that you'd feel that someone who's making videos like you would feel comfortable making videos without having a little bit of assistance from Nathan and myself and, you know, whoever else you'd like. So, again, I'm glad we can do this. I'm glad we're here.
Yeah, I know. In football, I have all the answers. So I feel pretty confident. Like I know
Exactly.
the best
Yeah,
player.
right.
I just don't. It's hockey. I got to say too, before we really dive into the playoffs, you're why I love hockey. I used to. You used to take me to Portland Winterhawks games, a WHL team, and I was like, "This is effing awesome!" Like I was watching soccer the last couple days. I've been doing working for the Portland Timbers I can say it now. Working for ESPN. Fuck them. I hate them. I'm free now. I hate giant networks. They're not really fun to work with. But soccer, I'm like sitting there going, I really wish this was hockey instead. Like I don't follow hockey very much, but I love the game itself.
There's nothing quite like it, especially as we get into the late spring and early summer. We get into the postseason, and you know, to piggyback off the Winterhawks, if anybody is listening here who doesn't quite have the exposure to hockey that you might wish you had, junior hockey runs around the country. There's many different leagues, high level leagues. Former or future rather NHLers will play in these leagues. Go check it out. Tickets are very, very cheap. Follow your local team, support them. They could use your gate revenue, and you're going to watch a great product. And hockey is as awesome as it is on TV. It's even better in person, and Zach can attest to that as well.
Oh yeah, I think football. I've been to NFL games. I don't really like going to games. I'd rather watch football at home with my own snacks and my couch. Hockey, I want to go to a Boston Bruins game. Like someday I want to go to these high level NHL games because hockey's like I think one of the best sports live. It's so the atmosphere, run into the boards, hearing that sound, like oh my gosh, I love it.
It doesn't translate on TV when there's a collision into the boards and a collision that looks fairly innocuous. You don't think much of it on TV because you aren't there to hear it. You don't see it the same way. But you might see a fairly normal collision into the boards near the net, and it will rattle the boards all around the rink for 50 feet in each direction. It shows you the level of contact, the speed, the strength of these guys, and it completely makes it a different thing in person.
Yeah, you feel it live. I want to dive in.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I want to ask about the most valuable player. So when I do the NFL SOS Awards, I give out 2 awards instead of 1. MVP really frustrates me because it's not definable. So I give out a Player of the Year. I gave that to Packers quarterback Aaron Rodgers, and I gave out a Most Important Player, which went to Tom Brady, because most important to your team is not also the same as the best year and the best statistics and best numbers. And so I'm really curious who your favorite or couple favorites for the NHL, the Hart Memorial Award, the MVP is.
Yep. You know, this year, unlike most, it's a runaway. It's Edmonton's Connor McDavid. He's putting up a year that is unprecedented. The NHL played 56 games this year. he was on pace for 150 points in an 82-game season. And points are goals and assists, both primary and secondary. So if you are scoring the goal or in on the playmaking of a goal, you get a point. 150 points was his pace for an 82-game season. That's the best in 30 years. I mean, Mario Lemieux was the last one to have 150 points in a season. He's had more games, Zach, with 3 points than 0 points.
I think he's averaging 1.7 goals a game, something like that.
He was averaging, I believe his season end average was 1.82 points per game, which is the most since Jaromir Jagr in the mid-90s. It's ludicrous what he's doing. It's out of control. He's seriously and he's 24. He turned 24 in January.
I didn't know he was 24. Oh my gosh.
He's 24 years old. He hasn't even hit his prime yet in terms of what we could see from him physically, mentally as a player. He's only going to get better. He's an outrageous player. And, for the sake of the show, I guess, second and third we could give to Austin Matthews of the Maple Leafs, who led the league in goals this year. He's a great player. He's turned it up for them. He's reached new heights. He's always been great. He's been great since he entered. He entered, near the same time as McDavid the year after. And since then, he's been great, but no one can hold the candle to 97 in Edmonton. There's nothing you can do about it. He's amazing.
What do you make of Winnipeg shutting them down in the first 2 playoff games they've had?
Connor Hellebuck is the best goalie on earth right now. He's the goalie for the Winnipeg Jets. He's an American goalie. We haven't had that level of shutdown American goalie in a long time. So come Olympic time, we're going to be excited to see Hellebuck in the red, white, and blue. He's interplanetary as well. He's given up 1 goal this series. Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid are the 2 best players on that Oilers team. They've been held completely pointless. Hellebuck's performing in a way that can take you deep. We saw it in 2019 with the St. Louis Blues in January. They were in last place in the league, and their young stud goaltender Jordan Binnington carried them through the playoffs. They won their first Stanley Cup in many decades. Not saying that that's what the Jets are necessarily going to do, but it's goaltending performances like Connor Hellebuck gives you that gives you the opportunity to do that moving forward. There's not much more you can say about him. He's been phenomenal, and he's shut that powerful group in Edmonton down.
As an NFL guy, it's cool to hear about any team named the Jets in the playoffs. I'm curious if they get past Edmonton, how far? Because I'd relate everything back to football. In football,
of course,
you have this one position quarterback, which is a little bit different than everything else. And there's only one, and there's only one play. They're very important.
Mm-hmm.
A goaltender's a lot like a quarterback. There's only one. They're very important. They really kind of dictate whether you win or not. And how far can their goaltender take them if they get past Edmonton?
He can take you all the way. He can take you to the very end. Assuming they are able to get past Edmonton, they're going to likely see the Toronto Maple Leafs. Because the way that the playoffs structure is this year, it's different because of how COVID worked. They played many fewer games. The first 2 rounds of the postseason are all interdivision. Yep. So if Edmonton wins against Winnipeg, if Winnipeg beats Edmonton here, they're going to play likely the Maple Leafs because they've looked so great against Montreal. And we can go into the Maple Leafs here in a little bit, but it's going to be a different thing for Hellebuck and for Winnipeg come Toronto, because instead of just the two guys you really got to worry about in McDavid and Draisaitl, that Maple Leafs team is so deep and they come at you constantly. They got guys up and down the roster, forwards, defensemen who are dangerous. If he stays locked in, anything can happen, and that's kind of the beauty of the NHL playoffs. I would pick Toronto over them, but if he maintains this level, there's what are you going to do? Is kind of the way it goes. You
can do everything you can, but you can't score, so you got no chance.
It's such a fine thing. I was just going to say it's such a when in basketball and football and even in baseball to a little bit of a lesser extent, you've got so many scoring opportunities in the NHL. You're averaging 5 or 6 goal events per game split in each side. The margin for error is so thin that if you've got a goalie who might steal, what would have been 1 goal, and he can take that away from his great play, that is enough to turn an entire game. You do that a couple times, you turn in a series, and that happens every year. It happens all the time. We're seeing it right now.
I want to hear about Toronto. You mentioned them, and I'm just curious what your thoughts are, your analysis, and are they in the conversation for title this year?
I think they're definitely in the conversation. I think their chances have taken a significant hit, along with their captain. Have you seen the Jonathan Tavares incident that happened,
what happened?
in Game 1? So John Tavares is the Maple Leafs captain. He's an exceptional player. He started with the New York Islanders, played there for many years before leaving to Toronto in free agency. He's probably he's their second or third best player, and he's their captain. He was handling the puck about 10 minutes into the first period of Game 1 of their series against Montreal. He's hit by Ben Sherratt in central ice, in the neutral zone, in the middle of the ice. It's a clean hit. He goes down, and in an attempt to kind of mitigate the hit, he kind of spins, but he's already on his way down, so he's rotating on the ice, and he starts facing back the way he came. And another Canadiens player, Corey Perry, this is completely an accident. There was no harm intended. He, in an attempt to get out of the way of Tavares, who's now on the ice because of the initial hit, knees Tavares in the face. He's probably skating at 25 miles an hour. Corey Perry's a big man. Tavares is knocked out. Tavares is in a rough way. Major concussion, out indefinitely. It's an unfortunate incident. It was sad to see. It was scary to see in real time because of the way that Tavares, had his body was reacting to the hit. So, that aside, and all of our thoughts out to JT. He's a great player. He's a great captain. That's going to hurt them from a hockey perspective. Clearly, again, he's their second or third best player. He's their lifeblood. He's their captain. Where their ceiling has changed in the last several days to where, I would say I think Toronto could beat about anybody to now they've got this kind of reputation, Toronto does. They've got this DNA of being a team that can't get it done in the crunch time. They have a propensity to choke. And now that you've lost your captain and one of your best players, I think that reality becomes a lot more likely as we get further in.
I'm told there's a narrative that Canadian teams can't win or don't normally win a title, and I hear that, and I think that's dumb to me. I look at, Sam Howell's the quarterback at North Carolina right now, and he is getting compared to Mitchell Trubisky, who failed horribly, and I'm like, they came from the same place, but it's a different situation. Like, you can't compare. Location doesn't define how you do and how well you can succeed. And I think that's kind of interesting. What do you make of that narrative? And people throw stats like a team hasn't won since this date years and years ago. But I'm like, a good team's a good team no matter where they're based out of, right?
Yeah, and I'll admit this is a thing that American hockey fans do to rile up Canadian fans because Canada, hockey's Canada's game. This is the whole thing. A lot of it is kind of tongue in cheek. It's in jest. There's
probably some joy though, like, ha, we're better at you than your own sport.
But the fact is that everybody, we prod at them, but everybody knows at the end of the day, 60% of the league is Canadian players, whether they're in America, on American teams or not. There's only, there's a 1/3 of the league is Canadian in terms of teams. So there's just fewer teams that can win it. So a Canadian team hasn't won it in quite some time. I don't think that's necessary. I don't think that's a geographical thing. There's no geographical reason for that. It's just the way that things shake out when, over 20 teams are of the 31 are in America and there's only a few in Canada, and that's that's the way it goes. But a lot of Canadians hoist the cup every year whether they play for an American team or not.
You pointed something out the other last time we talked. You said like this is a weird round in the NHL playoffs because something happened with COVID that I missed, went over my head, where some teams are like in Game 5, some teams are in like Game 2 or 3 right now. What happened there with COVID that kind of threw some of the scheduling for round 1 of the NHL playoffs out of whack?
Yeah, so 6 weeks ago, I would say roughly, there was a widespread attack of COVID-19 through the locker room and front office of the Vancouver Canucks. Now, going back further, because of COVID, the league wanted to cut down on travel restrictions, and there was also the issue of not being able to get in and out of Canada as American citizens. Yeah. So the NHL divvied up the league to where instead of the traditional division format, there's a North, East, West, and Central divisional format. The North is all Canada. Yeah. So moving forward now, because the Canucks have this bout with COVID, they had to stop playing for a month. They missed out on a bunch of games. But in order to keep playoff seeding stable, and in order to have draft position make sense and all that, these games got to get made up. So there was a point where the Vancouver Canucks, a non-playoff team, a team that missed the playoffs, was playing the Edmonton Oilers, a playoff team, in a regular season game, while a playoff game in the East was happening.
Wow.
It's been outrageous. So and as a result now, because the Canucks had to finish up their season by playing playoff teams in regular season games, the Oilers and the Jets, two Canadian teams, are now 2 games into their series, while Washington and Boston are going to start Game 5 here shortly. It's become just an outrageous thing, and it's nobody's fault necessarily. It's just, the Canucks undergo this COVID thing at the worst possible time with not enough time to make these games up. And Edmonton's got reason to complain, because in order for Vancouver to get their games in on this crazy sprint to the finish, Edmonton has to participate in that too. They have to be the second in the partnership to play these games. So Edmonton's coming in wiped because they've had to play 3 games against the Canucks in a week before the playoffs, and so it's been a messy situation. The league's doing what they can. There's no easy solutions. That's just where we are now. But it's created a weird wrinkle for the playoffs.
I gotta say, I like it. I think with what they could with the situation, it is what it is, right? I hate canceling games. I like uniformity, so I think it's really good. They got everything they could get done. It doesn't mess up the draft order and do stuff like that. I'm actually glad hearing that from you. Hearing that now, I'm like, oh, I'm actually glad they made up games, because in the NBA they canceled. It's just weird. I'm like that. It's not. It doesn't work for me. I don't like that at all. If you try to cancel games and don't try to make them up and fix that kind of loss of integrity, I guess, to the schedule.
Yeah, no, the league did what they could. I know the NBA has done the winning percentage thing. The NHL, it seems, was not interested in doing that. They were gonna, tell the Canucks, hey, this is what you got to do. We got to play these games. To the rest of the Canadian teams, we're sorry. The Canucks had to play several games against the Calgary Flames as well, a non-playoff team. So there are 2 non-playoff teams playing games during the playoffs in a regular season format. Just
That's
weird
cool,
stuff
though.
like that. It was kind of funny. And the Canucks fans and Flames fans get an extra, a little bit of hockey to, they get to see their teams play in May, which is nice.
Well, it kind of reminds me of the NFL had a game every single day of the week last year. Which when the hell is there football on a Tuesday or a Wednesday? Never. Friday? Yeah. What?
It's awesome. I mean, I'm more than happy to sit down on a Wednesday and watch some football, but it's definitely not the norm.
No. I'm curious, because I have a very ignorant question coming next. So prepare yourself. I'm going to ask something dumb.
No dumb questions. No dumb questions, Zach.
Is Minnesota always considered the West in the NHL? Because I've driven from Seattle to Minneapolis. That's not the West, at all.
They're the West in the NBA?
No, correct. But that's a split down the middle divide. I think I'm not criticizing. It's just funny to me. We have St. Louis I kind of get, because the St. Louis Rams were for a while and they moved, whatever. But, man, Minnesota, it's funny that's a Western division. And it kind of shows how the center of the NHL really is very northeast.
Yeah, and that St. Louis and Minnesota in the West, and they had to do it again because they had to stratify Canada and keep Canada kind of contained. Yeah. But Vancouver, without a doubt, further west than any team, really. I mean, short of the California teams. And, you've got Edmonton and Winnipeg kind of in central Canada there as well. I don't, Canadian geography is not my strong suit necessarily, so sorry to the Canadians out there listening to this. But, they're right there in kind of that middle area too. So it's just funny how the divisions have worked out, especially for this year. It's been an interesting, again, a wrinkle to the postseason.
I once knew, but I want to make sure I know. What were the divisions before? Because there wasn't always a Canada Northern division, correct?
No, yeah, you're right. No, so it was the Pacific, the Metropolitan, the Central, and the East. Yeah. So in the Eastern Conference you had the Metropolitan, and then the South, and then you had in the Western Conference you had the Pacific and the Central. So that's how that goes. So it wasn't, in terms of the American teams, it wasn't too different. They stayed pretty much where they where they were before. The Canadian wrinkle is what created some difficulties.
Yeah. So it's interesting this year in the NHL, they've played only in their own divisions, basically, which is what it does is we haven't seen Pittsburgh play Colorado or Boston play Colorado. Are there any matchups you look ahead to and you're like, man, I can't wait to see this team play that team? Or you're hoping they do get to play each other?
No, I'm glad you went there because there's this whole teams have only played the same handful of teams all season. So as we get past the second round, because the third round, which would traditionally be the conference finals, is now just being called the third round, the Stanley Cup semifinals. We're going to see teams haven't played each other all year play, a series to go to the Stanley Cup final. So it creates a lot of intrigue. You don't have that same familiarity. You're playing these same teams for 56 games, and now you got to go play a team you haven't played yet this year. And, there's teams like Florida, like Carolina, like Minnesota, who did make the postseason last year. They made the play-in game. They actually lost to the Canucks, so they didn't make the full postseason. But these are teams that haven't made the playoffs in a little while, or haven't made deep playoff runs in a little while, who now, it adds a different layer of kind of how we're going to play this, because you haven't played these teams in the playoffs, you haven't played them in the regular season. You're just watching film and hoping you know what you can do.
Yeah,
it's a lot of chaos and it's a lot of fun. In terms of matchups, we need to see Tampa, Colorado, and how that can happen is going to be weird, because when we get to the third round, they're going to reseed based on regular season record.
Okay.
So
are they doing a bubble? Are they doing like 4 teams in a bubble kind of thing?
I believe so. I believe that was the confirmation that they were going to make the bubble for the last 2 rounds. I believe that's the case. We could get IT on that. So whether we see those 2 teams in the Cup final or in the Cup semifinal, it's going to depend on how the rest of these first round series shake out. That I think is what we need to see. That I think whoever wins that series, whether it's in the third or the fourth round, obviously the Cup final round, I think that team wins it all. I think it's I think it's kind of a 2-man race or 2-horse race with some other potentials lingering. So that's the matchup I'd like to see.
Do you buy into Colorado? The Avalanche have only played
absolutely
the West, so you still like they're incredible.
Absolutely,
Why?
they're incredibly deep. They're finding that their goaltending is not bad, which when you have a team that's as deep as they are and as talented as they are, you don't need much. There's these goalie analytics are getting more advanced. There's expected saves and goals saves above expected, and there's ways you can kind of analyze goalie performances on a more mathematical basis. And their goalie, Philip Grubauer, right now, he's playing exactly as he should be. He's not stealing games. He doesn't have to. He's also not giving games away, which, again, when you got a Colorado team like this, he doesn't have to. They won 5-0 against the Blues in Game 3. They did not receive any goals from Mikko Rantanen, Nathan McKinnon, Andrei Burakovsky, Jonas Donskoy, and Gabriel Landeskog. Those are their 5 top scorers. Not one of them scored a goal. They won 5-0. These guys can go up and down. They've played with crazy pace. They have the 4th most shots per game in the postseason, and 1, 2, and 3 have all played overtime games.
Wow! So
they put it on you. They never stop. They're crazy deep. Their goaltending is good. They're freakish. They're so good.
Is Colorado, the Avalanche, are they your favorite to win the Stanley Cup final?
Yes.
Is there anybody else in the mix that you? Yeah.
If I had to choose right now, it would be Colorado. In terms of other teams in the mix, I like Tampa. They won last year. The Stanley Cup is notoriously hard to win in repeat years. I think Tampa can do it. They've got a ton of experience that matters tremendously. They've got a great goaltender in Vasilevsky. A lot of experience. These guys, it happened. It's happened several years now where their best player, their captain, or one of their best players, Steven Stamkos, he's caught a bit of the injury bug of late, and it seems like he can come back and immediately swing things. Nikita Kucherov, same deal. He's their Russian sniper. He can miss however many games, and it seems like he returned from a long layoff in the first game he played to score 2 goals and notch an assist. He's crazy. They've got a great, experienced, talented defense group who is just as comfortable playing offense as they're playing defense on their own end. Again, Vasilevsky will turn a series. It's the series I want to see, Colorado and Tampa. I hope we get to see it for the Stanley Cup. But if we see it at all, it'll be exciting, because those are 2 teams that I think will really go to war. And then in terms of some more long shots, teams that are still going to be there, that have a shot, but I don't think necessarily can go all the way. The Boston Bruins are a great team. They're up 3-1 on the Capitals right now. They've got a lot of experience, in their group. They have what I think is one of the worst line. There's this concept of lines in the NHL. It's forward lines. It's 3 forwards, 4 lines. It's like your lineup basically. And Boston has this group of guys. They call the perfection line, which I think is the most like self-aggrandizing, like awful. I think it's an awful nickname, but it really speaks truly to who they are, because it's they play defense, they score, they hustle hard. It's Brad Marchand, Patrice Bergeron, and David Pastrnak. That group of guys can take them a long way. The Vegas Golden Knights have a lot of playoff experience. They have the third most winning postseason goalie of all time, Marc-Andre Fleury. There's an option there. They play a physical game that pays dividends late in the playoffs. Who knows? A lot of things could go on. It's the NHL playoffs. Anything can happen. But right now, I think it's Colorado, and I think it's Colorado beating Tampa.
That's awesome. I think that would be. I'm curious, if I may.
Yeah.
We've seen. So I compare everything to football. The New Orleans Saints the last couple of years have had Drew Brees, a aging, retiring soon. He just retired Hall of Fame quarterback, who I was like, man, it'd be really cool to watch him get another championship before he walked off into the sunset. I think the Pittsburgh Penguins are exactly the same. I know that.
Okay.
Sidney Crosby's 33 years old. Year 16. I don't know how much he has left. I think he's got maybe a little more, but I'm like, man, I don't think he would win this year and retire. But I wonder what you think, if they have a shot, if they're even. I know they're in the playoffs. They're doing okay, but I'm like, could they beat Colorado? Could they beat Tampa Bay?
With Sid, with Malkin, those guys, you can't count any of them out. Again, they've won a couple of cups themselves. They've made deep runs. They're crazy talented. I actually, in my bracket that I filled out, I picked the Islanders in 7. I picked Pittsburgh to lose in the first round. I picked a repeat of what happened back in 2019. The Islanders, instead of going in 7, actually swept the Penguins in the first round. Wow. I thought that DNA of that series from a couple of years ago would continue to ring true. The Islanders have head coach Barry Trotz, who's a defensive-minded, stern head coach. The Islanders' issue the last several years has been that they have young, talented, flary, explosive young players who, their penchant for defense is kind of fleeting. Trotz runs a very defensive system. He reins guys like that in, and since he's taken over in Long Island, they've shown a much more effective 200-foot game. They play in all 3 zones very well, and they're frustrating Pittsburgh. That series the tensions have run high in several games. They're getting under the skin of the Penguins. Evgeny Malkin is the Penguins' second or third best player at this point. He took 3 penalties in their last game just out of frustration. The Islanders are getting under the Pens' skin, and it's working, and this series is knotted right now. I think it goes 7. There is no result that would surprise me, but I would have to lean toward the Islanders at this point.
What about the story of Sidney Crosby? Do you think do you agree it's a cool, interesting story to see him go?
100%. 100%. Yeah. And the opinions on Crosby are polarizing. There's a lot of people out there who don't care for Crosby. I can see how some of his attitude, the way he carries himself can be a little bit grating, but you can't deny the player. He's the best player of his generation. He's a surefire one of the best to ever do it. And it's funny because if you don't watch a lot of hockey, if you're not super familiar, you picture an elite Hall of Fame lock player to be someone like Alex Ovechkin, who is that. Yeah. But this goal scoring, high flying, charismatic Russian dude, that's an elite hockey player. Sidney Crosby is the best version of a grinder, and a grinder is someone who you'd put on your third or fourth line. They're going to wear down the other team. They're going to win puck battles. They're going to be hard on the puck. They're going to hit a little bit. And Crosby doesn't do a ton of hitting, but the way that he plays with his face to the boards. He plays really, really strong on his skates. He has superior edge work. He's in front of the net passing. He's tipping pucks in. His game isn't super flair heavy. It's just ridiculously effective. And that's what I think will allow him to continue to play into an older age, as long as his health, will allow that. He's had some concussion stuff in his past that's been a little bit hazardous. But because he doesn't play particularly fast and he plays really, really smart and really, really strong,
like technical,
and doesn't super rely on athleticism, it's super technical. It's incredibly refined. That's a style that, he might play fewer minutes, but that's a style that you can throw on the power play. You can throw him, at the end of the bench, and he's going to give you good minutes for a long time as long as his health holds up. If he wants to. He's got nothing left to prove, though.
Are there any... I'm really curious about Taylor Hall. Taylor Hall is a former MVP winner. He went to Buffalo. It's one of the few moves this offseason that I actually paid attention to. And it's like, why did Taylor Hall go there? Like, they're an awful team.
Making a video about this. Didn't you make a Taylor Hall video like quite a while ago?
Pretty sure, yeah. I remember. I covered it at some point, going like, "What the heck? Why?" He got traded to Boston. What do you make of the trade? What do you make of you can even give commentary on going to Buffalo, because I would assume you agree. Like, maybe he cashed out, just wanted sold out for money, but I thought he wanted to win, and I don't know why then he went to Buffalo.
Taylor Hall is this crazy anomaly because he played 6 years in Edmonton to start his career.
Yep.
And he played well. I mean, in 13-14, at only 22 years old, he had 80 points. He's a great player. And he won a Calder his rookie year. He was the rookie of the year in 2010, 2011. He's an awesome player, and then he goes to New Jersey, and he's only there for 3 years. And then he gets moved on over to Arizona, and then back to Buffalo and Boston. It's this crazy scenario where you've got this player who's really talented, actually, who's only 29. He's still in his prime, and he's played for like 6 different teams because he's in this scenario where he's not quite good enough. At least the perception of him isn't that he's quite good enough to be a guy that you have to keep around, but he's good enough that you can, move him to provide you some other pieces, or maybe, the money that he wants isn't quite what you can afford to give for someone who's that stature. He's just in kind of a weird no man's land. He's a great player, and I think it was incredibly smart for Boston to pick that guy up. He fits what they need really well. That's a forward who can drive play. He's great at moving the play into the offensive zone. He's got great wheels, great hands. He's the kind of guy that you want to bolster your middle six group, to provide some offensive punch outside of that top line. He's a great acquisition for them. And at 29, he's still got so much life left. It feels like, because he's been involved in so many transactions throughout the years, it feels like this guy should be 34. He's still in his prime.
Yeah. When you look around the NHL playoffs, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
When you look around the NHL playoffs, are there any players or storylines you're like, man, that's worth following. That's interesting to me. Like, for example, Boston and the Capitals, I think 3 games in a row now has gone to overtime.
The
Capitals are down 3-1, but I'm like, that's
on my notes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's exciting and interesting. Are there anything else like that you're like, man, that's, and we can talk about the Capitals in Boston if you want. They play game 4.
I think that's what I want. That's the first thing that I want to talk about is that series, because to someone who, and this is not you specifically, just to anybody listening who might be, who might not quite know what the NHL postseason is and like what it represents and how you think of it as a hockey fan. This is a 3-1 series. You look at that as a basketball fan and you think 3-1, man, this, there's a better team here. It's over. It's done. And the last game they played, in Game 4, Boston played like that. They played a great game. They beat, I think the final ended up being 4-1. Prior to that, they'd played 3 overtime games, and that's the amalgamation of the NHL postseason. You're in overtime. You've got 10 skaters on the ice plus 2 goalies. You're running around hitting this frozen piece of rubber with sticks while you run on ice on razor blades. It's an inherently crazy game, and you go to overtime where it's golden goal. First team to score wins this thing. You're looking at a 3-1 Boston series now with 3 overtime games. Literally 2 or 3 bounces go the other way, and we're looking at a 3-1 Capitals lead. And it's easy to say, well, if this, if that. In hockey, it's true. You're one weird bounce away, one skittering puck hits the wrong skate, one shot off the post doesn't fall the right way. The Caps are looking like they might be on their way out, and if a couple of 50-50 things go their way throughout these last 4 games, they're looking at advancing, and that's the nature of the beast. That's why this trophy's so hard to win. That's why it's hard to repeat. That's why it means so much to the people who do win it. It's hard to win the Stanley Cup, even if you're a really, really good team. And and this series here is kind of that wrapped up.
Well, even the thought, 2-2 compared to 3-1. That's a massive swing. That one overtime game.
Huge swing.
I mean, that you made one of those 3 overtime games. You know what I mean? It's just crazy how the difference one win can do in a series
and
like
the Caps
that.
did win one of them. So
Yeah.
I mean, so they did take care of one of them. And if you're Boston, you're thinking, man, we could have an extra day off if that would have went our way in Game 1 in that overtime. Yeah. It perfectly represents what postseason hockey is: the tension, the energy, everything means something. Every second, every shift, a shift for a hockey player, for a forward is 45 seconds. And that's why, and that's what makes this such a beautiful game in terms of a team aspect, because in hoops or, even in the NFL to a little bit of a lesser extent, you could say, go out there, we're going to keep you out there. If the Lakers need some buckets, they're going to say, LeBron, we need you to play, 14 minutes in a row.
Yeah.
And hockey, you just can't do it. The capacity physically isn't there. You're expected as a hockey player to go for 45 seconds to a minute as hard as you possibly can and then take a 2-minute break. You can't send a guy out there for 14 minutes and expect him to produce. And because of that, it creates this team environment. And, you can't just lean on one guy. And because there's only 5 or 6 goals that get scored in a game most of the time, everything is so amplified. And that's what makes it beautiful in May and June.
As we talk right now, I'm going to date us real quick. Game 4, Hurricanes Predators are tied 3-3 in overtime.
They played double overtime their last game, so we're doing this again here.
And then the Avalanche and the Blues just started 0-0 in the first. I just wanted to be, that's when we're recording this. At some point,
yeah, that's a good, yeah.
I'm glad no one's going to get eliminated while we're talking. That would suck. But I wanted to, leave kind of a timestamp there.
Not while we're talking,
as hockey's happening. Yeah,
I think the Avalanche do eliminate the Blues tonight. I think that it might wind up be while we're talking, literally. But I think if you report back,
probably while
in
it's putting
2
out,
hours,
while it's uploading, maybe.
Yeah, while this is uploading, we might see an elimination from Colorado against St. Louis, which is expected. I don't think anybody's
they're up
going to
3-0.
be surprised when that happens. I picked it. I believe in 5. I thought the Blues might steal one. And they might, who knows, but I don't think that's much of a series at this point. I don't think it ever was, frankly. No disrespect to St. Louis, but it's when you're outgunned, you're outgunned.
Take me through your notes. What else you got, man? I'm curious.
We touched on it a little bit. This barn burner series between the Islanders and the Penguins. Despite all the overtime, despite all the 1-goal games that has happened throughout this first round, that series at 2-2 could go any direction. And again, we touched on it briefly, but that's just kind of that's the one thing that I wanted to bring up and to mention is if you're wanting to, competitive, high tension, violent to an extent, physical hockey, that's the series to watch right now. These are 2 teams with a lot of pride, with a lot to play for, who are playing a best of 3.
Game 5 is 4 o'clock Western time, Monday, tomorrow. That'll be awesome.
It is, yeah. Yeah, and again, that's going to be the game to tune in. Playoff hockey, I'm always going to be a proponent of watching every game you can, but if you're going to pick one game or one series to follow, I think from here on out in the first round, that's going to be the one. It's 2 teams that have quickly found they don't care for each other too much. They're locked in. Again, it's a best of 3 to advance. Both teams, you've got a lot to play for, like I said, a lot of pride to play for amongst each other. That's going to be the one. That's the exciting one right now for me.
Yeah, I'm lucky. I don't have to go to work tomorrow. I got to watch sports. That's my job. So I'll be watching Boston tonight. I'm really excited about. I got a big interview tomorrow, but I'm gonna really dive in and try to watch as much hockey as I can because there's so many good games and series going on. My favorite thing about sports is the moment where you're not sure what's gonna happen, where you're like, man, either team could win, and I'm convinced that either one has a shot. I love that, and for example, I can tell you right now. I am not going to watch the Colorado Avalanche game tonight. Like it's not. I don't have any question who's going to win the series. That's not exciting to me.
Even if they lose this game, it's not going to. It's not going to. You're not going to say, I wonder. What does St. Louis do this game they haven't done the last 3? What does St. Louis do this game that suddenly makes this juggernaut Avalanche team rendered inoperable? It's not going to change. They might win one. It's not going to matter.
Yeah, But man, you're right. The Islanders and the Penguins is like, oh my gosh. I don't know. And I think it's a good prediction to say it'll go 7 because I think that's very man. I appreciate the shout out because I was already thinking that was good. So to have you direct me towards that really excites me. Like I can pick this series and I make sure I watch every game.
That's gonna there's 3 games. I think there's gonna be 3 games left. There's gonna be at least 2. Obviously, and I think it's all appointment television right now. The way those teams are playing, it's and then moving forward, we'll see how these things shake out for the second round and the third round. Things are going to get really crazy because of the reseeding, but that's down the road. Right now, we've still got a lot of fun first round action to take care of and to watch, and it's going to be fun throughout.
What else has happened? You got notes on other stuff? I'll take it.
I think
I want to hear nerdy hockey stuff. Like you have passion. I love hearing it.
Nerdy hockey stuff. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So let's do this. So again, we talked about Connor Hellebuyck. He's 59 of 60, I believe, is the numbers in terms of saves and shots to this point. I've got this pulled up here. So again, I mentioned the goalie analytics earlier.
Yeah.
Connor Hellebuyck has been expected, based on shot location, to save 95.2% of unblocked shots that he saw. So basically a shot that doesn't get blocked by another player that comes in that he has to make the save on. He was expected so far, based on what he's seen, to save 95.2% of them. He's saved 99.3.
Wow. That's
he is third in goals saved above expected. So basically, how many more goals has he saved above what is expected? Kind of a similar stat. Mm-hmm. He has saved 5.5 goals. These are goals that, based on a lot of other metrics, are goals that should have gone in. 5 goals he's taken off the board in this series. Wow. It's outrageous. He's outrageous. He's phenomenal.
Well, that's how he's shutting down that incredible Edmonton offense. I mean, he really is.
Yep.
Because Connor McDavid puts up video game numbers. I mean, that's literally what I was told by Nathan Shield this morning. He literally was like, it's playing NHL, the video game.
It's like playing on rookie mode. It's like, you drop into do their career mode and you play on rookie and you put up numbers. You maybe can get to McDavid at this point. He's outrageous, and the fact that Hellebuyck and that Winnipeg group has managed to stymie him. It's not going to continue. It can't. He's the best player on earth. Yeah. He's going to get his eventually. But they're up 2 games, and if Edmonton, it doesn't matter if you're the better team. And I think Edmonton, top to bottom, is the better team, but it doesn't matter when you're down 2-0. You got to win some games.
I don't know that you hear this in the NBA a lot. People compare the NBA and the NFL and saying, like, well, in the NFL you win 1 game, it's a fluke, but a series is harder. I don't really like comparing, but I do like the thought that, in the NFL you can create a great game plan and shut down Patrick Mahomes on a good Sunday, right? But in the NHL, to do what they've done 2 games in a row against Edmonton, that's not just a fluke. That's not one good game plan. That's really impressive hockey to me. I'm like, you're right. I'd be surprised if they did it for a whole series, but man, they've really taken that off the board. I'm like, that's just impressive to me.
It's crazy, and it's frustrating on the other end if you're a fan, if you're a player of the Oilers, to know that you've got these 2 elite guys and 1 guy who's just on the top of the mountain by himself, and you've got to you've been watching tape, you've been playing this team all season, you know what you got to do, and then Connor Hellebuyck wakes up and he eats his Wheaties and he just decides none of it matters. He just everything you didn't practice, all of your ability, everything you've done, all your crazy moves, all your passes, all your shots, it just doesn't matter because I'm here, and he's committing larceny, and he's hopefully I think it'd be fun to watch him continue to do it because he's again out of this world.
Yeah, awesome. That's all I have. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Anything I'm missing, or any? I don't want to leave anything on the table. So if there's anything left you want to talk about, I'm all ears.
I think for now we've kind of went over it. There's some series that are a lot more meaningful, I think, to the observer's eye right now than others. We talked about Colorado, St. Louis. We talked about the Isles and Pittsburgh and how that stuff matters and doesn't matter. I think that for now we just sit back, we watch the utter chaos that is late May hockey. We enjoy ourselves, and then when round 1 comes to what will undoubtedly be a thrilling close, we reevaluate and see where we are come round 2.
Awesome, man. I cannot wait for that day. It's always good to talk to you. Tell your dad I said hi. I love
Absolutely.
your dad. He's the best. And, dude, thank you so much.
Thank you, man. Hey, we mentioned it at the top. Uncaged Pod on YouTube. Yes, that is. It's an MMA podcast I do with my partner John. We went on a brief hiatus near the end of last year because of some stuff happening personally in my partner's life. Positive things, not negative things, positive things. But had to take a break. We're coming back now. We've got some awesome interviews with fighter coaches. We're talking to Diamond Dustin Poirier's coach, the 155-pound UFC champ. We're doing a big documentary on him as well coming soon. So a lot of good stuff coming out of the Uncaged Pod channel on YouTube for anybody who's into MMA, UFC, any combat sports.
I got to say, I apologize. I hate when I never like making a guest plug themselves. I meant to
It's
say
all good.
that. It's awesome.
It's all good. Nobody judged that. We talked off air. He was very sure to want to bring that up. Zach's not being a selfish host here. He really.
Well,
feels bad about
I just
it,
like what you do, and I like you, and I have no problem. There's some people I'm like, I wouldn't have them on. I don't want to promote them. I don't. But you're not one of those people, man. I love what you do, and I love promoting your voice and who you are.
Well, hey man, we appreciate that. I appreciate that immensely. NHL playoffs, MMA, it's all around here. We're having fun, good times. So I look forward to talking to you soon on and off the air about
Absolutely.
all things sports.
Thanks, brother. All right, guys, that's all I have. Thank you so very much for tuning in. I learned a lot. I'm actually recording this way later. I was sitting editing the podcast. I finished editing it, and I realized, oh my gosh, I have no way to outro the show. I didn't record an outro. So here I am recording an outro. There's no video because I'm just sitting in a t-shirt. But I learned a lot. Editing this podcast taught me a lot about what I think I want to do next time. I want to have some graphics. I want to get more. I just want to refine this idea and do a better job with the round one recap. So if you're a hockey fan, expect more episodes like this where I dive into hockey. We'll do a recap of round one down the road. And until the next episode, I love you. I appreciate you. I hope you have a great day. And take care, guys.